I wanted to try to summarize what I think is at stake this fall and why I believe this is the most important election of our lifetime. And also, in a way, I guess, why I think I am probably uniquely suited to be the Republican nominee if we're serious about not just defeating Obama, but also changing Washington, D.C. And I was with... And I think for the young people who are here, my number one message is that we can change things, that we are not trapped into decay. We're not trapped into weakness in the world. We're not trapped into a decaying culture. We're not trapped into economic decline. These are functions of decisions made by a national establishment which is profoundly wrong about the nature of reality and which has been implementing policies which are profoundly destructive. And so I think it's important. And Herman Cain was campaigning with me on Saturday. And as you know, he's very big on numbers. And so we were talking about his favorite number, which I'll bet all of you know. Not just one. You have to say it 3 times for Herman to be truly happy. But we were talking about it, and as we chatted, he said to me, you know, that I should be able to, I could summarize the impact that I had as Speaker with 5 numbers. So I'm going to give you, they are $1.13, 4.2%, 11 million, 2/3, and 4. Let me briefly explain. $1.13 was the price of gasoline on average per gallon while I was Speaker. 4.2 was the percent of the unemployment rate when I left office. $11 million is the number of new jobs created in the 4 years I was Speaker. 2 out of 3 are the number of people who left welfare and went to work or went to school through welfare reform. And 4 is the number of years the federal budget was balanced after the Balanced Budget Act of 1997. Now, I mention that to you because we do not have to have the disastrous policies that Washington is imposing on us. We can, in fact, change things. But it requires boldness, it requires clarity, and it requires courage, because, of course, the entire establishment will work every day to undermine, ridicule, and minimize the chance of real change. Essentially, we have a competition between 2 worlds. On the one side, there is a left-wing world which has a very particular sense of values and how history should occur. On the other side, there's a classically American conservative world which has a fundamentally different sense. Now, it starts at values. The base of the conservative American understanding of reality is our founding document, the Declaration of Independence, which says we hold these truths to be self-evident. This is the first break point between the liberals and the rest of us. The Founding Fathers didn't say we have this theory, we believe in situation ethics. It might possibly be true on Thursdays if it doesn't offend anybody. Within political correctness, we would like to suggest maybe. I mean, these are folks writing a document to take on the most powerful empire in the world. And they were doing it on behalf of truth. They said, all men are created equal. At a time in 1776 when that was the most radical political statement that had been made at a time of kings, queens, emperors, and czars. And they meant it. Now, were we perfect? No. Did we have slavery? Yes. Did women have a secondary role? Yes. Have we spent 225 years making this the freest, most open society in the history of the human race? Yes. Do we have people who come here from everywhere and learn to be American? Because American is a learned civilization? Exactly. And they went on to assert the heart of American exceptionalism. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, I want to drive this home for a second because it is central to the choice we are making between Barack Obama and the radical left and American traditional values and history. The Declaration of Independence says that God endows each one of you personally with sovereignty. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Unalienable means no president, no bureaucrat, no judge can come between you and God. Now, this is the heart of our fight with the Obama administration's war against religion. By what right does a secular president impose on a religion his particular version of reality? By what right does he dictate to a religion how they are allowed to worship? He has no right to do that. It is clearly unconstitutional, and he should be stopped. You have my commitment that the day I am inaugurated, that very day, I will sign an executive order repealing every act of anti-religious bigotry by the Obama administration. Now, it goes on to say we're endowed with certain rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is a second big argument we have with Obama and Saul Alinsky and modern radicalism. The right to pursue happiness in the 18th century actually meant virtue and wisdom, not hedonism and acquisition. The Founding Fathers actually believed that a wise people could remain free, but a foolish people would end up in a dictatorship. You'll notice what you're guaranteed: the right to pursue happiness. Doesn't say you're guaranteed the right to happiness. There are no provisions in the Declaration of Independence for happiness stamps for the under-happy. There are no provisions in the Declaration of Independence for a federal Department of Happiness to assess whether or not we are meeting up to our minimum happiness requirement. And if somebody had gone to the Founding Fathers and said, do you realize that politicians someday will get to a point where they will come into a room like this and they will say, I'm going to take from the overly happy and redistribute to the underly happy? They would have said, by what right does some arrogant politician believe that they get to personally judge which Americans are allowed to do what? And by what right do they get to set the standard for redistribution? And they would have said, that's the beginning of the end of liberty. That's how wrong Barack Obama is. Now, let me apply this difference in worldviews at a very practical level. The Obama administration is dedicated to an anti-American energy, expensive gasoline policy. This is not an accident. The Secretary of the Secretary of Energy in 2008 said he really wanted to see American prices get to a point where they resemble Europe, where it's $9 or $10 a gallon. The President has said, you know, you ought to buy smaller cars. Now, let me start with a simple premise that most Oklahomans will understand. You cannot put a gun rack in a Volt. it takes a genuinely radical administration to turn gasoline policy into an anti-Second Amendment position. But let me carry it a step further. And this is really important. I say this as a former teacher of environmental studies. We used to use a book called The Limits to Growth. It was a fascinating book. I taught environmental studies in the early 1970s. It was really intriguing. It used modern computer technology. It did all sorts of interesting things. It had one profound problem I discovered over the following 20 years. Every single major conclusion was wrong. And what you have today with Al Gore and what you have today with Barack Obama are people who still believe in the original book. And what the book said was there are limits to growth. For example, there's a whole concept called peak oil, which makes sense if on the surface. It says, oh, gee, eventually we'll run out. Now, it's technically true, just as eventually the sun will quit producing heat. But it's not a practical problem. It's like the astronomer who went to the small town, gave a lecture, and was awakened at 2 in the morning by somebody who said, did you say the sun would burn out in 5 billion years or 4 billion years? And he said, 5 billion. He said, thank God, I can go to sleep now, and hung up. Here's what we've learned in the last decade, and this is absolute proof positive. One, we've learned that there are new drilling technologies that enable us to find gas in shale. What we thought into the year 2000 was a 7 or 8 year supply, we now believe is at least a 125-year supply. In the year 2000, we were going to import liquefied natural gas from the Middle East. Now we believe we're going to export liquefied natural gas to China. Nobody in Washington wants to confront how big a change this is. And yet it's gigantic. 2, North Dakota has 25 times as much oil as the U.S. Geological Survey used to think. Not 25% more, 2,500% more. And it's a fascinating story because the only reason we know this is it's on private land and the liberals couldn't stop it being developed. If this had been at sea or if this had been on federal land, it still wouldn't be developed. Now, what does this mean? It means if we follow an American energy policy, and if we consciously open up federal land and we consciously open up offshore development, we can create enough oil and gas to be independent of the Middle East, period. Now, this policy has 4 great advantages. First, if we decide that we're going to produce enough energy here in America, and there's some evidence that in this decade we're going to be the largest oil producer in the world, bigger than Russia and bigger than Saudi Arabia. If we decide we're going to go and really use all of our sources of energy, it has a huge national security implication. Never again will an American president bow to a Saudi king. Somebody suggested to me we could do a bumper sticker that says, stop bowing and start drilling. And that would give you the difference between Obama and Gingrich, okay? I'm on the drilling half, he's on the bowing half. Second big advantage. If we kept $500 billion a year at home buying energy here at home instead of overseas, we'd create well over 1 million new high value added jobs, and we put Americans back to work and increase the American economy. You know, the president's very proud that in Obamacare he has extended the length of time you can get your parents' insurance until you're 26. I would like to be able to create enough jobs that you can actually get a job and buy your own insurance. Third, the amount of royalties that might be generated by developing all of our energy resources could actually be as high, according to Harold Hamm, who's developed North Dakota, could be as high as $16 to $18 trillion over the next generation. That's about the size of the entire national debt. That's how much it could help us without raising taxes to have the revenues to get back in fiscally good health. Finally, if we go all out to do this, there is no reason we can't get gasoline down between $2 and $2.50 a gallon. Now, the establishment, I got this pushback yesterday, the establishment will say, well, who knows what's going to happen, and after all this and after all that. Look, this is pretty straightforward. What we do know is under the Obama policy, prices are going up. What we do know is under the Obama policies, we depend on Saudi Arabia. What we do know is under the Obama policies, we create no American jobs with new energy development. With Gingrich policies, what we know is we will dramatically expand our independence of the world market, dramatically expand our capacity to produce energy without regard to our foreign potential enemies, and in the process, prices will clearly be a lot lower. Now, I picked $2.50 as a stabilizing price for capital investment reasons. It could easily go down to $2, and here's a fact. It was $1.13 when I was Speaker. It was $1.89 when Obama was sworn in. So why do we have this assumption all of a sudden, oh, gee, that's the distant past? He hasn't been president that long. There's no reason we can't get back down to $2 or $2.50. We know how to create jobs. Ronald Reagan had a policy. Cut taxes, cut regulations, develop American energy, praise the people who create jobs. 16 million new jobs were created. We followed the Reagan policies while I was Speaker. 11 million new jobs are created. So if you go to newt.org, you'll see a whole range of job-creating steps, from zero capital gains tax to bring hundreds of billions of dollars back into the U.S. to invest, to a 12.5% corporate tax rate, which will liberate about $700 billion in profits overseas. And by the way, at 12.5%, I tell my liberal friends, General Electric will actually pay taxes. So there's a whole new virtue to this. We want 100% expensing, which means whether you're a farmer, you're a factory, you're a doctor, if you buy new equipment, you write it off in 1 year. What that does is it allows us to be the most modern system in the world with the most modern equipment so we can compete with China and India and win. At the same time, I would modernize unemployment compensation to require you to sign up for a business-led training program if you sign up for unemployment compensation. So while we're paying you, you're getting retrained to use the new equipment so we have better human capital and better industrial capital simultaneously. It is fundamentally wrong to give people money for 99 weeks for doing nothing. And remember, in 99 weeks, they could earn an associate's degree. I mean, that's how big the mismatch is. In North Dakota, where they have a 3.5% unemployment rate, they actually would have a 0 unemployment rate if they had enough training. They have 16,000 to 18,000 jobs in the oil industry they can't fill because they don't have the right skills. And they have people over here who can't find a job because they don't have the right skills. If you had a program of matching up the people through training with the jobs, they would probably be close to a 0 unemployment rate. I mean, that's the impact of oil development in North Dakota. 2 last tax changes. I would abolish the death tax permanently so we do not punish people for being successful. And I believe as a person, as an individual, you should have the option of a 15% flat tax. You can keep the current code with all its complexity and all of its paperwork, or you can write down, here's how much I earned, here's how many dependents I have, here's 15%, 1 page. It turned out when we proposed that, we picked 15%. This is based on a program that they have in Hong Kong that's been working for about 40 years, where they have 2 options. We picked 15%. It turned out that Governor Romney pays about 15%. The liberals all promptly said, that's wrong, he should pay more. I thought this was a good example of liberalism. They said he should pay more. No, as a conservative, I think you should pay less. So I want to bring you down to the Romney rate. And let me be very clear. This again causes great confusion in the Washington establishment. This is not a revenue-neutral proposal. This is a tax cut. There will be less revenue in the short run. My goal is to shrink Obama's government to fit the revenue available, not to raise your taxes to catch up with Obama. Let me also say, as part of this program, you need a whole new approach to regulation. I would replace the Environmental Protection Agency with a brand new Environmental Solutions Agency that had to apply common sense and economic reality. And I would modernize the Food and Drug Administration so that it had a commitment to being in the laboratory, understanding the science, and accelerating getting new knowledge to the patient, so we had the fastest possible transition, so patients got the most modern, best possible care, which also turns out to be a huge job creator in the world market, because health will be the biggest single market in the 21st century. For the young people here, let me give you an example of the difference between the establishment's austerity and pain-oriented model, in which, by the way, they want you to be austere and you to have pain. They don't actually apply this to themselves. And the way I would approach it from a Reaganite tradition of growth and opportunity. We need to offer young people the opportunity to have a personal Social Security savings account that they can invest in themselves. This is not a theory. Chile's been doing it for over 30 years. The city of Galveston, Texas has been doing it for over 30 years. If you would be allowed to take your part of the Social Security tax, the personal half of it, and you could put it in from the first day you go to work, and it build up compound interest for your entire working career, you end up with 2 to 3 times as much money. It is your own personal estate, so if something happens to you, it doesn't go to the government, it goes to your family. It also means the politicians no longer tell you when to retire. It's none of their business. It's your money and it's your savings, and you do what you want to. It has 2 other terrific side effects. A personal Social Security savings account generates so much capital that the economy grows to be $6 to $8 trillion bigger annually by the end of your lifetime, because there's so much new investment money. In Chile today, the size of their Social Security savings fund is 72% of the whole economy. It is so big, they now allow Chileans to invest outside the country because the economy is too small to absorb all the savings. Now take our current indebtedness and compare it with that level of savings. It's a much healthier system. Last thing, if you make and this is an opportunity, you don't have to do it, but although the Social Security actuary estimates that between 95 and 97% of all young people would opt for the system because the return is so much bigger. If that happens, in one generation, we eliminate 50% of the inequality of wealth in America, because every worker becomes an investor and a saver, and that changes the entire pattern of American wealth. Now, you're going to hear a lot of talk from Washington about how Gingrich has these ideas that aren't practical, that are too big, you can't get there. I want to just give you one common sense example. Now, and remember my background now. I've been studying this stuff since August of 1958 when I was in high school. I served 20 years in the Congress. I was the first Republican Speaker of the House in 40 years. I was the first re-elected Republican Speaker since 1928. We balanced the budget for 4 years, the only time in your lifetime it's been done, and we passed welfare reform, the largest entitlement reform of your lifetime. So I'm not standing here as some theoretical abstract person. I actually think we can do this stuff. But let me give you an example of how big the gap is between the practical world that works and Washington. How many of you have ever gone online and tracked down a package at UPS or FedEx? Raise your hand if you've ever done this. Okay, so this is not a theory, right? Now, this is very important. You know, you go to Washington and people say, well, that's an interesting idea. No, it is an absolute reality that we have the technology that allows UPS and FedEx at no extra charge to allow you to track your packages in real time. Right? Am I right? This is not a theory, right? So that means that every day they track 24 million packages so well that their customers can track them individually. That's the world that works. That's what I'm basing my whole campaign on. Now you have Washington, where the federal government can't find 11 million illegal immigrants, even if they're sitting still. So I have a simple proposal for you. We should send a package to everyone who's here illegally. And then when they get it, you know, we can find out exactly where they are. I mean, now let me say for my friends in the press, that was hyperbole. We don't need a fact checker to go out and... But do you understand the point I'm driving at? The scale of the gap between the incompetence of the federal government and, frankly, state and local governments, and what we routinely now see in the modern world. That's how big our opportunity is. And this is the fight between liberalism and conservatism. I want to actually modernize government so it moves at the speed, the efficiency, and with the money savings you expect in the private sector. They want to regulate the private sector so it becomes as inefficient and as incompetent as government. Let me talk briefly about one last topic, and then we're going to take questions. All of you should be very deeply concerned about national security. Barack Obama is the most dangerous president in modern American history. Someone was arrested over the weekend for trying to blow up the U.S. Capitol. They happen to be from Morocco. Under the Obama administration's willful dishonesty, it would be highly inappropriate to describe what motivated them, because that would be somehow politically incorrect. Now, imagine in 1946, we had tried to describe the Soviet Union, and the government had said you're not allowed to use the word communist. Now, I mean, any honest person knows what motivated somebody who came here. This is not smearing everybody. This is not Islamophobia. If we can't have an honest conversation about radical Islamists, and we can't figure out there is a very specific group of people across the planet. These are not Norwegian Rotarians. Yeah. There's a very specific desire to kill us. There's a desire to destroy our civilization. Look, churches are being burned in Nigeria. Churches are being burned in Egypt. The fact is that there were people who represent a minority sect of Islam who are being killed in Indonesia. Across the planet today, the forces of religious repression are on the march, and this administration has intellectually disarmed. It is morally disarmed. It is incapable of describing what threatens us. When somebody who's a major in the U.S. Army jumps up at Fort Hood, yells Allahu Akbar, kills 13 Americans and wounds 30, carries in his wallet something that says Warrior of Allah, and we write a report which doesn't even reference radical Islam, that is willfully dishonest, and then we adopt a budget based on that dishonesty. So the president wants to unilaterally weaken the United States. He wants to cut the aid to Israel for its anti-ballistic missile defense. He refuses to take Iran seriously. We are in a world that is very dangerous. And I say this to those of you who represent the next generation, because you're going to bear the consequences. We are really at risk someday in your lifetime of losing an American city. We should be very sobered by the threats that are around the world. When Ahmadinejad, the dictator of Iran, gets up and says, Israel can be eliminated from the face of the earth, we should assume he means Israel can be eliminated from the face of the earth. I mean, this is not... So defeating Barack Obama becomes, in fact, a duty of national security, because the fact is he is incapable of defending the United States. This pin is the flag that George Washington flew in front of his command post at Valley Forge. I wear it to remind myself and to remind you that when they met in the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, the man who presided over the Constitution has spent 8 years in the field as the commander-in-chief. He spent 1 week at Mount Vernon in 8 years. Now, when they wrote the president is commander-in-chief, they meant the president is commander-in-chief. The #1 job of the president of the United States is to protect the citizens and the country from enemies foreign and domestic. And I promise you that if, with your help, I become the commander-in-chief, I will take no duty higher than to protect the Constitution, to protect the United States, and to protect the people of the United States and our allies from those who would destroy us, because there can be no higher obligation if, in fact, we're going to have a decent life in the future. I'm very grateful to have this chance to share ideas with you. I look forward to your questions. Let me just say, I hope every single one of you is going to vote. Your participation really matters, and I think it's really, really important that the United States recognizes, the people recognize, that this election, it may well be the most important election of our lifetime, and we need everyone to be actively engaged. And I look forward to the questions.
Hello, Speaker Gingrich. How are you?
Good.
Good. My name's Christine. I'm a government major here at ORU. And my question is in regards to health care. I'm just wondering what the federal government's role is in health care and what reform you would enact to help keep the quality of health care high, but the costs from getting out of control.
Well, first of all, I would say that one of the first things, if you go to newt.org, our first goal under a proposed 21st century contract with America is to repeal Obamacare completely. And we would campaign this fall with the pledge that the new Congress, when it's sworn in on January 3rd, would stay in session and would repeal Obamacare before I was sworn in on January 20th so that we could go ahead and sign it on the very first day. I think you then have to replace it with a system which, frankly, is local. What we really want is the patient, the doctor, and the hospital at a local level, because health care in the end is going to become more and more personal. The more we know about the human genome, the more we know about your background as a unique individual, the more we're going to be designing solutions that really fit one person. And what you don't want to do is have a Washington bureaucracy make broad, sweeping decisions which are fundamentally and profoundly wrong. They may be right for 80%, and they may kill 20%. And that's why you want to get medicine back to the level of the doctor, the patient, and the hospital. There are reforms we need. I helped found the Center for Health Transformation, and we have dozens of specific ideas that would improve the system, starting with, for example, if you want to take costs out of the system, no single thing will take more cost out of the system than litigation reform. Okay? Thank you. Back and forth.
Hey, Mr. Speaker. My name is Jackson Lawmeyer, and my question for you is, if you are the GOP nominee, how do you plan on swaying my generation to vote for you when in 2008 my generation overwhelmingly supported Barack Obama?
Well, look, I think younger people overwhelmingly supported Barack Obama in 2008 because his slogan was, "Yes, we can." His slogan this year is going to be, "Why we couldn't." So, you know, I'm pretty, here's what I would do on campus. I'd go on campus and say, Newt Gingrich wants you to have a personal Social Security account you're going to own that's going to give you 2 or 3 times as much money, and no president's ever going to go to threaten people that they're not going to get their checks. Newt Gingrich wants you to have a job so you can actually move out from your parents, buy your own insurance, and have your own place to stay. Newt Gingrich wants you to have $2.50 a gallon gasoline so you can go find work. And Newt Gingrich wants you to be physically safe from foreign danger so you can enjoy the life you just earned by having the job you just got, and someday you can enjoy the retirement you'll have earned by actually having your own savings account. So that's the package I'd offer. By the way, you'll notice, I say this to the students who are here, you'll notice that your parents are even more excited than you are by the idea of you having your own job and moving out.